The difference between the people who spend years trying to learn something and the people who learn the same thing in a few months is not always intelligence. It's not necessarily talent either, and it is certainly not luck. Sometimes it's simply the way they learn. Most people approach learning the wrong way. They consume, memorize, highlight, watch, reread. They collect information and convince themselves that knowing about something is the same as knowing how to do it. But it is not. You can watch 100 videos about speaking Spanish and still struggle to have a conversation. You can read 20 books about writing and still struggle to write a single good page. You can watch every tutorial about playing guitar and still not know how to play, because information is not mastery, and consuming knowledge is not the same thing as building a skill. The fastest learners understand this. They don't simply put more hours into learning, they make every hour more effective. They understand how attention works, how memory works, how forgetting works, how practice works, and most importantly, they understand that the brain learns fastest when it is forced to actively participate. So if you've ever thought, I'm just not a fast learner, you may be wrong. You may simply have never learned how to learn. Because learning is a skill itself, and once you learn how to learn, everything changes for you. You begin to realize that you don't need more time, you need a better method. So now we're going through 10 principles that can dramatically accelerate the way you learn almost anything. A language, a musical instrument, a professional skill, a subject, a sport, anything. Because the goal isn't simply to know more, the goal is to become someone who can walk into a completely new field and know how to become good at it. If you've resonated with this video thus far, I would like you to like and share it with someone who needs to listen to this with you. The first mistake most people make when learning something new is assuming that more time automatically means more progress. It does not. You can spend 3 hours studying something and remember almost nothing the next morning. Or you can spend 30 focused minutes with the right method and remember what you learned for years. The difference is not always how long you study. It is what your brain is being asked to do while you're learning. Number 1, stop passively consuming information. The fastest learners don't just consume, they interact, they question, they retrieve, they test themselves, they make mistakes, they try to explain what they've learned without looking at the answer, because your brain does not become stronger by simply seeing information repeatedly. It becomes stronger when it has to retrieve information. Think about the difference between reading a chapter 5 times and closing the book and trying to explain the chapter from memory. The second one feels harder, and that's exactly why it works. Difficulty isn't always a sign that you're learning badly. Sometimes difficulty is the learning. So instead of reading something over and over, ask yourself, what do I remember? Can I explain this without looking? Can I teach this to someone else? Can I use it in a real situation? The moment you force your brain to retrieve what it has learned, you stop being a passive consumer and become an active learner. Number 2, learn the 20% that creates 80% of the results. You do not need to know everything to become good at something. You need to know what matters most. Every field has fundamentals. The small number of skills that create a disproportionate amount of your results. If you're learning a language, you don't need to memorize every word in the dictionary. You need the words you are most likely to use. If you're learning to play guitar, you don't need to learn every chord before you can play a song. If you're learning business, you don't need to understand every theory before you can start creating something valuable. The fastest learners ask a different question. Not what can I learn, but what do I need to learn first? They identify the fundamentals and attack them relentlessly, because there is a difference between being knowledgeable and being effective. You can know 1,000 things that don't matter, or master the few things that change everything. So before you start learning anything, ask, what are the essential skills? What do beginners waste time learning? What would give me the biggest improvement in the shortest time? Find those things and focus there first. Number 3, learn by doing, not just by studying. There's a moment where learning has to become action. You can study how to swim, but eventually you have to enter the water. You can study how to write, but eventually you have to write something. You can study a language, but eventually you have to open your mouth and speak. And this is where many people get stuck. They keep preparing, they keep researching, they keep watching tutorials, they keep telling themselves, I'm not ready yet. But readiness is often an illusion. You become ready by doing the thing you are afraid you are not ready to do. The fastest way to learn is to enter the arena. Make the mistake, get the feedback, correct yourself, try again. Because mistakes give your brain information that theory cannot. You discover what you don't know by attempting to use what you know. This is why practice should begin early. Don't wait until you're good to start doing the real thing. Do the real thing so that you can become good at it. Learning something once doesn't mean you know it. You know it when you can find it again when you need it. This is where many learners lose everything they worked so hard to acquire. They study, they understand, they feel like they've mastered it. Then a few weeks pass and most of it is gone. The problem isn't necessarily their memory. They simply never gave their brain a reason to keep it. Number 4, use spaced repetition instead of cramming. The brain is designed to forget, and that's actually a good thing. Your brain is constantly deciding what information is worth keeping and what information can be discarded. If you learn something once and never use it again, your brain has no reason to believe that information is important. But when you return to the information again, after some time has passed, you send a different signal. This matters, keep this, and when you return again and again, over time, the information moves deeper into long-term memory. This is why studying something for 5 hours in one day is often less effective than studying it for 30 minutes across several days. Cramming can create the illusion of mastery. Spacing creates retention. So don't try to learn something once and never look at it again. Return to it, test yourself, use it. Come back before you've completely forgotten. The goal is not to repeatedly look at information. The goal is to repeatedly retrieve it. Number 5, break complex skills into smaller pieces. Sometimes the reason you're struggling to learn something is because you're trying to learn too much at once. Imagine someone deciding, I'm going to learn piano. That's a massive goal. Instead, learn one chord, then another. Learn one scale, practice one transition. Learn one simple song, then build from there. The same principle applies to almost anything. If you're learning a language, don't think, I need to become fluent. Think, today I'm going to learn how to talk about my daily routine. If you're learning to draw, don't think, I need to become an artist. Learn to draw one shape, one object, one face, one body, then connect the pieces. Complexity becomes manageable when you break it into components. And once you understand the individual pieces, you can begin putting them together. This is how experts think. They don't see one enormous problem. They see a collection of smaller problems that can be solved one at a time. Number 6, use the skill before you feel ready. One of the fastest ways to accelerate learning is to put yourself in situations where you have no choice but to use what you're learning. Because pressure reveals gaps. Imagine learning a language by only studying vocabulary. You may know hundreds of words, but the moment someone speaks to you, you freeze. Why? Because recognition is not production. You can recognize a word when you see it, without being able to retrieve it when you need it. The solution is to practice retrieving it. Speak, write, perform, build, create. Use the skill in the real world. Make yourself uncomfortable enough to discover what you don't know. Then go back and learn that specific thing. This creates a powerful cycle. Try, fail, identify the gap, learn, try again. The faster you complete this cycle, the faster you improve. Number 7, get feedback as quickly as possible. You can practice the wrong thing for years, and if no one ever corrects you, you may become extremely good at doing it wrong. That's why feedback matters. You need someone or something that can show you where you're going wrong. A teacher, a coach, a native speaker, a mentor, a test. Even your own recordings can reveal mistakes you didn't notice while performing. The important thing is that you don't wait months to discover that you've been practicing incorrectly. Get feedback early, get it often, and don't take correction personally. Correction is information, it is not an insult, it is a map. It tells you where you are and where you need to go next. The fastest learners are not the people who never make mistakes, they are the people who discover their mistakes quickly. There's a point in every learning journey where information stops being enough. You've learned the basics, you've practiced, you've made mistakes, you've received feedback, and now you have to do something different. You have to make the knowledge your own. Because the ultimate goal is not to remember what someone else taught you, it is to be able to think with it, use it, adapt it, and eventually create something that did not exist before you learned it. Number 8, connect new knowledge to what you already know. Your brain doesn't learn in isolated boxes, it learns through connections. The more connections you create between new information and things you already understand, the easier that information becomes to remember. So whenever you learn something new, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? How is this connected to something I already know? Where could I use this? Why does this work? Don't just memorize the answer. Understand the relationship. Because memorization can give you a fact, but understanding gives you a framework. And frameworks are powerful. Once you understand how something works, you can often reconstruct the answer even when you've forgotten the exact words. This is why curiosity accelerates learning. The person who constantly asks why often learns faster than the person who simply asks, what do I need to memorize? Number 9, teach what you learn. One of the fastest ways to discover whether you actually understand something is to try to explain it to someone else. Because when you're learning privately, it's easy to mistake familiarity for understanding. You read something and think, yes, that makes sense. But then someone asks, okay, explain it to me. And suddenly you realize there are gaps. You know the words, but you don't really understand the idea. Teaching exposes those gaps. It forces you to organize your thoughts, simplify complicated ideas, find the missing pieces, and explain what you know in a way another person can know it too. You don't need a classroom to do this. Explain it to a friend. Write it in your own words. Pretend you're teaching a child. Talk to yourself out loud. The moment you can explain something simply, you usually understand it more deeply. Number 10, build a system, not a burst of motivation. This is the final and perhaps most important secret. The fastest learners do not depend on motivation. They build systems. They know when they will study, what they will study, how they will practice, how they will measure their progress, and when they will review what they've learned. They don't wake up every morning and ask, do I feel like learning today? They already decided. This matters because motivation is temporary. Systems are repeatable. You might feel inspired for 3 days, but if your entire learning strategy depends on inspiration, you will eventually stop. Instead, create a routine that makes learning automatic. 30 minutes every morning, an hour every evening, one conversation every day, one project every month. Whatever works for your goal. The specific routine matters less than your ability to repeat it. Because the person who practices consistently will eventually overtake the person who occasionally works incredibly hard. You don't need to become obsessed with learning. You need to become consistent enough that learning becomes part of who you are. Maybe you were not a slow learner. Maybe you were simply a passive learner. Maybe you spent too much time consuming and not enough time retrieving. Too much time preparing and not enough time practicing. Too much time trying to avoid mistakes and not enough time using them as feedback. Because the fastest learners are not necessarily the people who understand everything immediately. They are the people who know how to turn confusion into curiosity, mistakes into feedback, information into practice, practice into skill, and skill into mastery. So, if there is something you've always wanted to learn, stop telling yourself that you don't have enough time. Stop telling yourself that you're not intelligent enough. Stop waiting to become the kind of person who can do it. Start. Learn the fundamentals. Practice actively. Retrieve what you know. Space your learning. Break difficult things into smaller pieces. Seek feedback. Connect new ideas to old ones. Teach what you learn and build a system that you can repeat. Because you don't need to be a genius to become exceptionally good at something. You need to understand how learning works and then give yourself enough time to let the process work. The person you want to become is probably not as far away as you think. You may simply need to learn how to get there faster. If you resonated with this video, I'd like for you to like it, share it with someone you think it will resonate with too, and drop a comment. This will help the Human Mirror reach much more people who can find resonation with it. This has been the Human Mirror. Look closely, you are never invisible. I'll see you in the next reflection.